You've met him before. The guy who never raises his voice, always polite, always helpful. The one who says whatever you want when asked to make a decision. He doesn't challenge you, he doesn't argue, he never disagrees. On the surface, he seems like a dream, the perfect man, the nice guy. But what if I told you that behind the smiles, the nods, and the gentle tone, there's something else brewing, something darker? You see, the nice guy isn't as harmless as he looks. In fact, he might be more dangerous than the aggressive man you instinctively avoid. Why? Because he hides. He hides his anger under politeness. He suppresses his needs to win your approval. And he denies his true desires just to feel accepted. But make no mistake, the shadow doesn't disappear when ignored. It festers. And one day, it leaks out. Maybe it's in passive-aggressive sarcasm. Maybe it's in quiet resentment. Or maybe it's in sudden explosions that seem to come out of nowhere. But it's there. Always. So why does he do this? Why does the nice guy deny himself so much? It begins early. As a child, he might have learned that love is conditional. Be a good boy and mommy will be happy. Don't upset dad. Don't be too loud, too wild, too much. So he adapted. He muted himself. He became who others needed him to be. Over time, he lost touch with his own voice. And now, as an adult, he doesn't know what he really wants. He only knows how to avoid conflict. The nice guy isn't truly nice. He's afraid. Afraid of rejection. Afraid of being seen. Afraid of being disliked. He thinks being agreeable will make him lovable. But in reality, it only makes him invisible. And ironically, people don't trust him. Why? Because we can sense when someone is hiding, when they smile without meaning it, when they agree too easily, when they say yes but mean no. It feels off. Because it is. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The nice guy is run by unconscious fear. He avoids conflict not out of peace, but out of terror. He avoids truth not out of wisdom, but out of shame. He doesn't express his desires because deep down, he doesn't believe he deserves to have any. Now pause for a moment. Have you ever been this man? Or been close to one? Have you ever smiled when you were angry? Said, "It's fine" when it wasn't? Stayed silent to avoid being judged? Then this isn't just about him. It's about all of us. Because we all wear masks. We all play roles to fit in. But the mask of the nice guy is particularly deceptive because society rewards it. Women say they want kind men. Employers say they want team players. Friends say they want support. So the nice guy becomes exactly what they ask for. And yet, he still feels lonely, unseen, unloved. Because the love he receives isn't for who he truly is. It's for the version of him he's manufactured. And that kind of love never satisfies. It only deepens the void. In families affected by alcoholism, what breaks people the most is not always the shouting, the violence, or even the intoxicated nights. It's the silence that follows. That cold, heavy silence that settles in after every storm, pretending that nothing happened. It's in that silence that the deepest emotional scars form. Freud believed that repression, the refusal to confront painful truths, is the root of many neuroses. In alcoholic households, repression becomes a way of life. Children learn early not to ask questions. They become masters of emotional camouflage, experts at reading the room, always alert to the next unpredictable mood swing. They adapt, yes, but at a cost. Imagine being a child whose reality is constantly denied. Dad didn't drink that much. Mom didn't cry in the kitchen. The police didn't come to the house. And even if they did, it's just something that happens in every family, right? This constant denial fractures the psyche. The child starts to doubt their own perception. They learn to mistrust their instincts, to repress their emotions, to survive rather than live. Over time, they may develop anxiety, depression, or even addictive behaviors of their own. Not because they are weak, but because they were never shown how to process pain. Freud once said, "Unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways." In the context of alcoholism, this couldn't be more accurate. The emotions that children suppress, fear, sadness, anger, don't disappear. They turn into panic attacks at work, emotional outbursts in relationships, or a persistent sense of emptiness that no amount of success or love can fill. And what about the spouse of the alcoholic? Often, they play the role of peacekeeper, caretaker, or enabler. They learn to clean up the mess, literally and emotionally, to keep the family together. But in doing so, they often neglect themselves. Their emotional needs go unmet. Their identity becomes entangled with their partner's sickness. And the more they try to fix the alcoholic, the more they lose sight of their own boundaries, dignity, and worth. This dynamic creates a dangerous loop. The alcoholic feels guilt for their behavior, the spouse feels guilt for not being able to stop it, and the children carry both. It becomes a generational burden, passed down like a silent curse. But here's the thing. No one tells you. Children don't need perfect parents. They need present ones. They need someone who can say, "I'm sorry," and mean it. Someone who can admit, "This isn't okay," and take steps to change it. Alcoholism thrives in denial. Healing begins with truth. Sometimes the truth is ugly. It means admitting that your parents' love was conditional, that your childhood wasn't safe, that the people who were supposed to protect you were, at times, the ones you feared most. But acknowledging that truth doesn't make you disloyal. It makes you conscious. And consciousness is the first step toward freedom. In Freud's theory of psychoanalysis, bringing the unconscious into consciousness is how we begin to heal. For families affected by addiction, this means naming the unspoken, talking about what happened, giving words to what was felt but never expressed. Because when pain is hidden, it controls you. But when it is named, it begins to lose its power. If you grew up in a home where alcohol changed everything, where laughter turned to tension, where hugs felt conditional, where love came with fear, you are not alone. And you are not broken. You were shaped by chaos, but you can choose clarity. You don't have to carry the silence anymore. There's something haunting about growing up in a home where addiction was the background noise of your childhood. You tell yourself, "I'll never become like them." But somehow, without realizing it, the patterns creep in. Freud described this as the compulsion to repeat. An unconscious drive to recreate unresolved trauma, hoping this time it might end differently. But without awareness, it never does. That's why children of alcoholics often find themselves drawn to chaos. They end up in relationships with partners who are emotionally unavailable, volatile, or controlling. Not because they want to suffer, but because suffering is familiar. Silence, tension, walking on eggshells, these become the emotional language they understand. They may also become overachievers, obsessed with control and perfection. They think if they're good enough, they can earn love. Or they go the other way, avoiding responsibility, numbing themselves with substances, work, or endless distractions. Either path stems from the same wound, never feeling safe to simply exist. And then comes the hardest question. What if I'm the one continuing the cycle? This question is not meant to shame you. It's meant to wake you. Because the moment you ask it honestly, you are no longer blindly repeating the past. You are observing it. That's where transformation begins. Freud taught that insight alone isn't enough. You also need to grieve. Grieve the childhood you didn't get. Grieve the love that was promised, but never delivered. Grieve the part of you that believed it was your job to fix what was broken. Grief is not weakness. It's the body releasing what it was never allowed to feel. It's sacred. It's necessary. In families where addiction ruled, there was rarely space for grief, only survival. But healing means creating that space, for yourself, and maybe even for those who hurt you. That doesn't mean excusing the damage. It means recognizing that people can be both wounded and wounding. Your father may have been a good man, destroyed by his own pain. Your mother may have been strong and loving, but too exhausted to protect you. These truths can coexist. You don't have to become their judge, but you also don't have to carry their burden anymore. The most radical thing you can do is break the repetition. Create a different story, one where emotions are allowed, where silence is not a shield, where love is not traded for loyalty. This may mean going to therapy, setting boundaries, cutting ties, learning how to speak honestly. Not just to others, but to yourself. It's hard, it's slow, but it's possible. You don't have to become who they were. You can become who they couldn't be. Healing from the shadows of addiction isn't just about survival. It's about rewriting your legacy. You don't owe anyone a perfect ending, but you do owe yourself the truth that what happened to you shaped you, but it does not define you. You were not loved poorly because you were unworthy. You were loved poorly because those around you didn't know how to love any better. Freud believed that what we repress as children becomes the blueprint for our adult struggles. But blueprints can be redrawn, stories can be rewritten, and cycles can be broken, not through force, but through awareness, compassion, and radical honesty. If your childhood felt like a battlefield, it makes sense that your adulthood feels like a recovery zone. But recovery is not weakness. It's sacred rebellion. Every time you pause instead of reacting, every time you tell your inner child, it wasn't your fault, every time you choose presence over patterns, you're breaking a chain. Maybe you now have children of your own. Or maybe you are reparenting yourself. Either way, you get to make different choices. You can say, I'm angry, without throwing things. You can say, I'm sad, without apologizing. You can say, I need space, without fearing abandonment. Because love without safety is not love. And silence in the face of pain is not peace. It's self-erasure. You might think healing looks like forgiveness or reconciliation. Sometimes it does. But other times, it looks like boundaries. Like choosing not to visit someone who still drinks. Like not answering calls that drain your spirit. Like letting go of the idea that you must fix everyone in order to feel valuable. There's a quiet power in saying, I don't have to keep bleeding so others stay comfortable. The real transformation happens in small moments. When you pause before repeating the toxic script. When you recognize that voice in your head, the critical one, and answer it with kindness. When you begin to live, not in reaction to your past, but in honor of who you're becoming. Freud once said, out of your vulnerabilities will come your strength. And you've carried so much for so long. But now it's time to carry something else. Hope. Hope that love can be different. That safety is possible. That your story, no matter how it began, is still yours to shape. You don't need permission to heal. You only need the willingness to begin. And if you're reading this, maybe you already have.